Hey everyone, it's Thursday, and this is another episode of Nick Valencia Live. Let's get right into it. I'm your host, Nick Valencia, and we've got a great lineup here with Congresswoman Nanette Barragán joining us in just a little bit. But we wanted to start with this big news of what you saw this morning, perhaps on my social media. Some of you may have already seen it yesterday. This 5-year-old boy who was taken and used as bait by ICE agents. He was on his way home, stopped in his driveway after preschool. They were after his dad. His dad fled on foot. They eventually were able to take his father into custody, and they stayed with him, according to the Washington Post. And not only that, they used him then as bait, effectively. They had him knock on his own door to see if there was any other adults inside, to try to lure anyone else out inside. There was apparently a family member who was trying to plead with ICE agents to leave the 5-year-old with them. Now, we understand, according to the Washington Post, the father has been detained, as has the son, this 5-year-old. Neither of them were U.S. citizens. And according to their reporting, they are currently being held in an ICE detention center in San Antonio. It appears what we're seeing on the streets is ICE agents feeling like they're above the law, feeling like they could do whatever the hell that they want. And that really is a topic that we want to talk about today with the Congresswoman in just a little bit. But we would be remiss not to mention that Jack Smith, special counsel who was going after Trump, you probably heard a lot about him. He was in front of Congress today, the House Judiciary Committee, where he testified, and he was asked if he would prosecute the president again. Listen to him here. He doubled down on his efforts, and he said even if things were, even if he had the opportunity again to do it, he would still press charges against the former president. Take a listen to what he said.
Testify before the committee today. I want to be clear. I stand by my decisions as special counsel, including the decision to bring charges against President Trump. Our investigation developed proof beyond a reasonable doubt that President Trump engaged in criminal activity. If asked whether to prosecute a former president based on the same facts today, I would do so regardless of whether that president was a Democrat or a Republican. No one should be above the law in this country, and the law required that he be held to account, so that is what I did.
No one should be above the law. But what we saw yesterday in a newly obtained memo by the Associated Press and NBC was it shows that these ICE agents are given the guidance from their superiors that they effectively are above the Constitution. We learned yesterday that they no longer have to wait for a judge's signed order or warrant in order to enter a home, that an administrative warrant is enough for those who have a final removal over their head, over their household. And so we've been seeing these ICE agents go door to door. And now this new policy guidance that they're giving really brings into question constitutional limits, constitutional protections, and whether or not they are following the law. We want to start here with our conversation with Congresswoman Nanette Barragán. She represents a district of California that was hit hard by the ICE siege of Los Angeles in that first week. Paramount, Watts, Compton, San Pedro. Congresswoman Barragán, thank you so much for taking the time with Nick Valencia Live. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks for having me.
I wanted just to get you to react. Do you think that ICE agents are acting as though they're above the law right now?
They are out of control. The memo that you mentioned is appalling and should call out, really should spark everybody to speak up and to speak out.
Yeah.
When you think about this for a moment, just think that most people are supposed to feel safe in their home, that nobody can just barge in their door.
This is our sanctuary, right?
Right. I mean, we have the Fourth Amendment. Nobody can come in through your door without some kind of a judicial warrant saying they can come in. And in some states, you even have the right to protect yourself in your home if somebody comes in. So the thought that ICE has memo out, or was circulated memo secretly, that said you don't need a judicial warrant, you can just go in, is really outrageous. It's completely an abuse of power. It's above the law, and we have to make sure that there's an immediate effort to stop that. Sometimes it's going to take in a court of law, sometimes it's taking a judge, but this administration should know better, but this is also why we need congressional oversight. We need every Republican to speak out.
And Minnesota has a castle doctrine, which allows you to use force if somebody's entering your home. There's stand your ground laws in Florida. I mean, what kinds of scenarios is this going to create? It's not just Republicans who believe in the Second Amendment,
That's right. And that's why it's startling and alarming that you're not having more Republicans speak out. It really should be, this is an issue of privacy. This is an issue of the Fourth Amendment against search and seizures. This is an issue that everybody should be standing up for, because it's a constitutional right that we all have. U.S. citizens and non-U.S. citizens alike. You have these rights and these protections to be in your home and to know that you can go to sleep, sound and be peaceful, that no one's going to be coming into your home without a judicial warrant. And ICE is now suggesting that they should just ignore the law and go ahead and do it.
And then now today, you're seeing photos of this 5-year-old. They were circulating yesterday. I think it's a fair point to make, and it was made by my executive producer, that perhaps this policy that we see now being obtained is not necessarily new policy, because cruelty seems to be the point. Or do you see this as an evolution now, or is this just sort of now we get verification that we have it, from a legitimate source that this is what they're doing?
I think it's gotten worse. I think part of that is you have a president that's empowered an agency that has basically said, I'm going to pardon anybody. They can do no wrong. There is strict immunity, things that A, we should not be doing, and B, making sure there's accountability. There is no oversight happening in the Congress, right? They've ceded all their power. It started out, I think, of let's see how far we can go. And at this point, let's do whatever we want until somebody stops us. And when you think about who's being hired, some of these agents are, they're getting no training. I mean, you've read articles, I've read articles about people who haven't really even been interviewed, as long as they have some allegiance, as long as they're showing up. And so these people are being given a weapon. They're being told to go out and this is supposed to be civil enforcement. They're going over the top. As we've seen just in the community, they're still shooting folks next to schools where children are playing. We've seen many instances where ICE is lying. They've said, hey, they ran my car. But then you go look at the video evidence and it's the opposite, where ICE ran them. They can't be trusted, unfortunately. They're making our communities less safe. And I think they're going way above and abusing their power.
I mean, we see Bill Asaley, the state attorney in California, overcharge all the time and lose on merit in court. They get the headline. It looks like they're going after this activist or, the undocumented community. Well, really, it's these activist cases they're overcharging, and they lose on merit. You had mentioned something right now, Congresswoman, that things you believe have gotten worse. This is a time to reflect and step back, because it was your district that was effectively singled out. I remember watching it here where I'm at in Atlanta and seeing journalists targeted. My friend with the LA Daily Press, Daily News, Ryan Mena, she was targeted. Just what have you gone through these last 7 months?
Well, it's been really hard, and it's really tough for our community. And this is, people saw it started happening in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
It started, my district was, I think, day 2 after the fashion district, and people were, outraged, but they never thought it would get worse than that. And we didn't think it'd get worse than that. But in our community, you have small businesses that are suffering because people are not going out anymore. They're not spending their money. Just this week, the LA Times had a cover story about in the fashion district, not only business down because of last year, but there was another raid again this week in the fashion district where you have high, Latino populations. And we're talking about even folks who have papers, people who are documented, American citizens are afraid to go out because they don't want to be detained. They don't want to be wrongfully deported. They don't want to be assaulted, as we've seen happen time and again, where American citizens are being thrown to the ground, a woman with a concussion. I even think about the story of the woman in Illinois who was shot 6 times.
Yeah.
And the video evidence showed that ICE was lying. These are the things that my constituents see and they worry about. And they say, I'm not going to go out. I'm not going to spend money. I can't. And there's terror and fear. And think about this one thing. This is so sad. Little kids, they're afraid when they even see a black SUV now.
Yeah.
Because their association is they're going to come and get me. And that is something that is traumatizing for the community. It's terrorizing our community. And what we're seeing happen in Minneapolis is adding to that and adding to that fear.
So I'm sure you have your constituents who come up to you and say, Congressman, do something about this. Help us, protect us. The criticism that I hear from my more progressive friends is that Democrats didn't do enough to insulate the community from this kind of persecution from Republicans. Do you agree with that? And what are you doing right now for accountability and oversight?
Well, when you have a president that's out of control and giving, unfettered access, and you have a Congress who just gave billions of dollars to ICE to go into all the communities, there's not one thing that could have been done to stop this. We are continuing to do oversight. We've had hearings in Los Angeles, led by the Oversight Committee. We were just in Minneapolis to do more oversight. number one, we have to continue to share the stories and to highlight these injustices. We know that public opinion matters, and it has changed. This president used to run on immigration and people used to trust him. And now people have said, this is not what we signed up for. This went too far. These are not targeted enforcements. These are not serious criminal offenders. These are people who've been here for a long time. There are gardeners. Some of them are in the process of trying to get citizenship, of trying to be, waiting in line. And yet, even when they're showing up to their own check-ins, they're being taken and they're being disappeared, as we've seen when they were sent to El Salvador. So it is something that we're going to continue to say, how can we rein in this DHS, this ICE that is out of control? That's part of why you saw conversations happening about this DHS bill, is we need to put in guardrails. Of course, Republicans wouldn't agree to any of them, which is why I can't vote and support it.
Part of the thing that we see out there is people feel like they've got to take matters into their own hands and fight. The catch-22 that I always see, Congresswoman, is that, look, I am not condoning violence, but I will tell you that that's when news cameras show up when shit burns down. And it is an effective tool that has been used in all sorts of cities across the country during social justice movements. We saw it used in Minneapolis last week when they were getting into confrontations and they chased off federal agents. I know you have condemned violence, but what are people supposed to do when they feel like the police can't help them out, their lawmakers are have their hands tied behind their back, and their families are being persecuted?
Well, there's a number of things. Number one, I think we need to continue to document everything we can through video recording as much as we can, because we know that is the only accountability that we have.
Yes.
We're going to continue to push on getting bills like, having prohibiting mask for law enforcement. Because if you think about it, all other law enforcement, they don't wear masks, right? They have a badge. There's identification. So there's a lot of things that we need to continue to push for, but public sentiment matters. And we also need Republicans to grow a spine and to stand up and to speak out. Right now, they've ceded all their power. They've given away any oversight ability. That's a real danger to our democracy. It's a danger to our communities. And we know it's making us all less safe. So this administration continues to make us less safe. We have to continue to share these stories. And I think that my hope is that we will start getting some brave souls that will speak up and speak out, because we've got to start also by making sure that we have control of the House in 2026 at the end of the year, because then we can have oversight hearings. Then we have a greater leverage on the power of the purse and what's going to get funding and what's not going to get funded. And right now, Republicans have just said, we don't need Democrats. We're going to do whatever we want.
Could this all just be wiped away with amnesty? I think about what Richard Nixon proposed: 7 years, you're here without a crime, you're, fast track pathway to citizenship. Where do you stand on amnesty? And it seems as though the last time we had a reasonable conversation about this, where it was bipartisan, it was like, 40 years ago or 30 years ago in Republican primary debates with Reagan and Bush saying we should be compassionate. It's like, we've gone so far over the edge from that. So, just straight up, where do you stand on amnesty?
Well, the Republican Party is not the party it used to be, because, as you mentioned, they were for making sure people who have been here had a pathway to citizenship. Yeah. And we believe there should be a pathway to citizenship. I can tell you there is a working group in the Congress that's made up of leaders of the different caucuses that are in talks on what that looks like. And that is part of the conversation. But I believe if you've been here in this country, you're a good citizen, you've been paying your bills, you deserve a pathway to citizenship. There are so many people like that. The problem is the immigration system is broken. Yeah. It's completely broken. It's very outdated, and it doesn't reward people that have been here, that have been paying their dues, and that should have that opportunity. And then, of course, we also have and see the abuse right now where they're getting rid of immigration judges. They're only making it harder for people's cases to be heard. And of course, there's that big fear that I also have, and that is with this administration getting rid of judges they don't like and replacing them with their own judges who are only going to do whatever the president wants and act as a puppet. The Congress is already like that. We don't need the judges to also be like that.
Or you have these JAG judges that are being considered to go over here an immigration case, and that's so complex. You think that they're going to really understand here, how to navigate these really, these complexities. Accountability is something that really is it's a concern for a lot of people. Like, are they just going to get pardoned like the January 6ers? Do you see that happening? Do you see any of these ICE agents one day facing a jury of their peers for some of these actions? Do you believe that has merit?
I believe that when House Democrats take the House back, there will be accountability, there will be investigations, and people will be prosecuted.
Do you think that when we have our midterms, because I do believe we're going to have a midterm, there are Republicans that are trying to change seats and get new positions, and they're investing already. The midterms are going to happen. Do you worry, though, because I do, about that we become normalized to these federal agents, these military type fatigues out there, and that is going to act as a sort of element of voter suppression on election day?
I do worry about voter suppression. I think those efforts are already underway. I know that there's a lot of conversations about measures that can be put in place to make people feel more comfortable. But I have no doubt this administration will do whatever they can to either not have an election or to make it as biased as possible, interfering with people's rights, whether it's trying to take away, the right to vote, the mail-in vote, or whether, as you say, they're going to put officers outside of polling locations to intimidate people. I mean, look, I worked back in the day during the second President Obama doing voter protection in Florida. And back then we saw people would stand in line and others would come out with a bullhorn and say, if you don't have a passport, you can't vote. That was a way to try to intimidate people back then. So I expect that we're going to see things like that, people lying to folks, maybe trying to say it's a different voting location, but also using law enforcement. And this is where we have to continue to prepare to do everything we can to make sure that people show up and that they have that right to vote, and that's protected. It's so critical for our democracy, something that I know this administration doesn't value, given everything that they're doing to be the next king and the next dictator.
When you were saying that, I just thought about what happened here in Georgia, where they took away people's ability to give water bottles to people in line or pass out pizza. That was happening during the 2020 election. That changed in 2024. The last question, you've been so gracious with your time, Congresswoman Nanette Barragán, for those who are just joining right now. She was very impacted by this. Her district was of the ICE siege of Los Angeles that first week of June. One of the questions I wanted to ask you about was California City. We are doing a deep dive investigative piece on the private prisons across the country. It is very evident to us that the moment somebody is taken into custody, the meter starts running, and the math is clear that this is all about a business. I know you have some thoughts and some big feelings on this. I would love to hear them.
Well, first of all, I think we need to end private prisons and the use of government using private prisons. What is extremely alarming, it should be alarming everybody in this country, is the number of deaths that have occurred in ICE custody, right? Think about this. You're taken into custody. You're supposed to be kept safe, and people are dying. They are literally dying. We are at a record level. Under the Trump administration, there have been 37 deaths, 37. Under the first Trump administration, when there was like one child dying, there was an outrage.
Yeah, Jacqueline McCall was there in El Paso.
Now we're at 37. Just this year alone, there has been 6. That should be alarming. It should be alarming for everybody that we stop that and we make sure that people have protections, that they're treated humanely as they're in detention. And of course, we've seen the recent reports that there's a possible homicide that happened where a guard maybe strangled a detainee. I mean, these are reasons our community is traumatized, because they think of, it's not just, am I undocumented? It's, if I end up in a place like this, I can die too. What are they going to do to me? Are they going to make an example out of me? If I talk back and they don't like what I say, are they going to harm me? Are they going to do something wrong to me? Those are serious concerns, and those should not be happening in the United States of America. And so we need to continue to raise awareness, speak out against this, make sure people vote, and Congress will continue to push in trying to get every single accountability measure we can. And of course, continue our hearings and have real oversight when we get the gavels back and take the majority back.
And I'm so grateful that you touched on the trauma, because there are so many people. I see it in their eyes. I've had PTSD. There's PTS out there on the streets of people who are seeing this, experiencing this emotionally, holding it and manifesting it in parts. It's just, it is so evident to me in the community around me, all the trauma that people are facing. And I know that you have heard it yourself. So God bless you, Congresswoman. Thank you so much. And we wish you the best of luck. We know that this is unfortunately just the beginning, and you're in it for the long haul. So thank you so much for taking the time with Nick Valencia Live. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Nick.
That was Congresswoman Nanette Barragán joining us. We wanted to show a piece from Kevin Foster. We were supposed to go to Kevin Foster after this. He is an independent journalist that some of you guys might have seen out there. He has been crushing it, man. He's been doing a lot of updates on social media based out of Portland, Oregon. And very recently, he was contracted by Mother Jones to do a piece for them. I want to show part of that. Eric's talking to me, asked me if I want to show the whole thing. I do. And I also had a guest for you guys, a federal prosecutor and a former, federal criminal defense attorney who I wanted to get his take on what he's seeing out there. While we play this, I'm going to get him in the room here. And Eric, I'll holler at you so we could drop off once I got him. Okay. We're showing the whole clip.
January 3rd, 2026, Donald Trump announced that the United States military had abducted and extradited Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. He then announced that the U.S. will essentially be running the country in the interim.
We're not afraid of boots on the ground if we have to have. We had boots on the ground last night.
But as headlines focus on Maduro's fate and the future of Venezuela under Trump, another side of the country's story is still unfolding here in the U.S. In the last decade, hundreds of thousands of Venezuelan migrants came to the U.S. to flee the Maduro regime and crippling poverty and conditions caused in part by extreme sanctions and other actions imposed by Donald Trump. I spoke with a Venezuelan family seeking asylum in Portland, Oregon, who are facing separation, detention, and deportation under Trump's anti-immigrant crackdown, and an even more uncertain future if sent back.
Este día él salió a trabajar como un día normal, pero iba a ser para la comida. No pasaron media hora que él me dejó y se fue, y cuando me llamó mi cuñada, que es su hermana, que ya lo tenía.
Journalism there. You might have seen him on your social media. He has been very active and growing his platform, man. I think he's approaching 50,000 followers on Instagram, and he's got a sizable following. Kevin Foster, come on in, man. Join us live here on Nick Valencia Live. How are you? There you go.
Hey.
Hey, how are you, man? What's
I'm
going
doing
on?
pretty good.
How are you?
Doing good. It feels weird almost to have this piece done. It's been quite a lot of time and effort that's gone into this, and it feels good, but it's almost like it's left me in a way, I'm just happy that it's out.
Yeah, you're doing such great work, and you're approaching this new media platform, just throwing yourself into it. So tell me about your background, like what made you want to become an independent journalist, and who are you?
Originally I got a background in economics, but then at some point I just decided that wasn't really the direction I wanted to go. And I started covering a lot of protest movements in Portland. And then over time, I kind of branched out a little bit. And especially when things started to crack down with ICE, I was like, you know what, I should just kind of go all into this and start producing more. And so I was going to the ICE facility a lot, putting myself in some pretty sketchy situations, but it was, I think I'm just inspired to tell stories and hopefully do things that can help people. Yeah.
And you're an effective communicator. And I tell that to people who have, look, I came, a little bit about me. I think I came from the legacy newsroom. I was at CNN for nearly 20 years, and I saw things shift there in the newsroom, and others of my peers sort of look at people like what you were doing, kind of looking down from their ivory tower.
Yeah.
You've heard the criticism. Like, my mom has fears. Look, Kevin, in my household, the nightly news is still success. She believes in what we're doing, but speak to that, I think, fear that people have, which there is merit in, that, like, how should I know that you're a journalist, right? Like, how do I know that you're actively using the ethics of a journalist? I see you, what you're doing and your word choice and how you're, but just explain that to people.
Yeah. I think this is something for me that I have put a lot of time into in terms of looking at how the mainstream media operates and understanding that, the mainstream media oftentimes, I think, works within or works in favor of systems of power. And I think a big piece of being an independent journalist is you're separated from the corporate side of things. You have the ability to really speak truth to power without I mean, you can still face consequences, but
Of course, you can get sued. You still get thrown in jail. You know, we saw what happened with Don Lemon, the threats that was coming from the DOJ.
yeah, yeah, and it's I think for me, it's what I always say is I point to people back to my work, and I also, I mean, I work with official outlets and stuff, but I don't put out anything that I won't stand by. But I think a big piece of what I'm trying to do, especially with my social content, is trying to go a step further with what I cover and talk about the context of a situation and not just here's what happened. I think a big thing that I've covered for a while is just talking about the situation with Venezuela. And I feel like there's oftentimes a lot of maybe small, sometimes big missing details about the legality of certain things. And yeah,
that's where you're able to fill that void. You think you can help sort of put context
yeah.
around it. What are some of the challenges that you face? Like sort of like oh my gosh, I can't believe, I've got to deal with this now. I've got this economics background, but now I'm a journalist. And what have been some of your challenges?
Oh man, I mean, how many times in a year can you hear journalism is dying over and over? It's just, I mean, the struggle in the industry.
Do you think journalism is dying?
I don't think that journalism is dying. I think that the mainstream is kind of struggling to find its place, and I think independent journalism is rising for sure. But it's a tough space. You asking people to pay you to go out and do work, people that don't even know you personally, I think. And then even mainstream outlets, it's hard to get paid. But I think that in terms of struggles, I mean, it's just, with the current administration right now, the word I've been using to describe what I'm doing right now is triage. It feels like I'm just constantly there's always the next thing. I have so many things on my plate, so many stories I want to tell, but it's just trying to prioritize and figure out what is most important to do.
You probably wish you could, clone yourself and make a duplicate copy.
Absolutely.
Who have been some of your inspirations? Who have been some of the people that you've looked towards and been like, hey man, that guy's doing it right, even if they are in legacy?
Yeah, I mean, I think a big thing that I've looked at is, I would say, I followed More Perfect Union for a while. There's not necessarily
John Russell, man, we love him. We had him on the show a couple months ago.
I know I really enjoyed Sean Morrow's cover of like techno-fascism.
Okay.
I think obviously I don't know if you've had Jared Zisser on before,
yes,
but
he's 3 times.
Okay, he's been like extremely helpful for me. And I think probably some of the people that inspire me to talk about the things that I do and where I go is like I don't know if you've heard of the podcast It Could Happen Here. There's Cool Zone Media. They also have another podcast called Behind the Bastards. The journalists there, like the deep storytelling that they do in coverage of the crisis in America is just extremely inspirational to me. And they do there was, I think, like one piece that really, it was kind of an inspiration for this story in some ways too, was I think his name's James West. No, that's the producer at Mother Jones. I think I'm forgetting his name. It might be James Stout, but he did a really, really good piece on migrants coming through the Darien Gap in Panama and Colombia. And
what does it mean to you to be a journalist, Kevin?
Oh man, these are some deep questions.
Oh man, only here, brother.
Yeah. I think for me, being a journalist is obviously, like, in an ethical sense, the truth is paramount to everything. It's like you kind of have to put your feelings aside in a lot of ways. But I think for me, and maybe this is a little bit of a different approach than some people, but my number one goal is to try to seek justice for people, to speak truth to power. I think a lot of my reporting is focused on accountability. Even before, when I was publishing more with like local outlets in Portland, a lot of it was police accountability. And even with this most recent piece, there's an element of accountability with how the US has created a lot of this crisis, this situation with Venezuela, and how we have sent people here, and then at the same time we are now persecuting them here. And I think that I like to, yeah, I think a lot of it really is just about holding power to account, understanding that it's not necessarily my job to make people happy, but yeah.
My mom always says, if you want a friend, get a dog, you know, a journalist, like, you're going to get hated. I probably get more hate now than I ever did.
Me too.
It's not probably. I definitely get more hate. It's so much that I've taken my family off of the internet. You know,
Yeah.
you're not with this name brand, right? Mother Jones is a recognizable name. You contracted with them. You're not, you know, always working with them. When you're out in the streets, when you're out in Portland, outside the detention centers, protection and safety is something that was like priority number one for us at the network. This is something that I'm still navigating. I'm going to Minneapolis tomorrow by myself.
Oh, wow.
What is it like out there for you? What have been your experiences out there being a solo journalist, independent journalist?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's quite a few factors. In some ways, I think that, I mean, I get on the scene and I'm there, I'm on the job, and I feel like sometimes people try to have conversations with me, and I feel like my head's almost like blank sometimes, just because I'm so focused on what's going on. But there's a lot of, I mean, situational awareness is involved, but I think something that became very clear very quickly, or at least back when I first started going to the facility in June, that was one of the most intense days there. And like, I didn't even have a gas mask. I was getting tear gassed, and I was like, oh wow, okay, this is like the real deal.
Yeah, you're
now.
learning trial by fire, basically.
Yeah, I mean, trial by like not being able to breathe. But now it's like, I think, I mean, there's like this, I feel this duty in a way to stay there, to be on the front line, to document like what people are really experiencing. I think one of the most visceral experiences for me was one of the days where the federal agents just unleashed this crazy barrage for like 5 minutes straight on the crowd. And like, at some point, like, I'm like, I can hear them firing pepper balls or rubber bullets or whatever, and I can't even see like more than 15 feet in front of me because there's so much tear gas in the air. And I mean, there's like obviously getting a helmet and body armor and whatever, but a big piece of it too is making connections with other journalists that are there on the ground and being like, hey, let's watch out for each other. That's definitely helps me feel a lot more comfortable while I'm there, for sure.
Well, that's the approach that I definitely take as well, you know. And I think like journalists should always start with somebody who's more of an expert in something that they have some more experience, you know. That's always been successful for me. Do you think being like so hyper local and plugged in to Portland? I mean, Eric got in my ear a short time ago and made the point like national news, you know, it's kind of hard to grasp on. Things happen hundreds, if not thousands of miles away. And with independent journalists, and you can make the argument just like with politics, journalism is hyper local, right? It's about what's going on in your backyard. How much has that helped you, do you think, to sort of have a niche and to be known for something and then expand beyond that?
You know, I think it helped me a lot on the baseline of just growth, because it helps to be putting stuff out there and have a niche community of people that are like, wow, this guy's really doing this. It's like, I mean, there's an element of me blurring between journalist and content creator as well.
What's that line?
What's the line? I mean,
yeah. It's debating. I really want to know what you think the line is. Because I don't, you know, this is a brand new space for me too.
It's tough to navigate sometimes. I think the difference between a journalist and a content creator, there's one, I think the like ethical guidelines of a journalist are a bit of a different space. I think the things that you seek out and the way you approach situations are differently. It's a really harsh dichotomy for me with, but like I've been at the ICE facility when there's a lot of like right-wing streamers. I mean, I think Nick Shirley was down there, and he's the guy who did the whole Somali crazy BS story in Minnesota. And I'm like, this guy's not in my mind, this guy's not a journalist. I mean,
Well, look, there's a rumor about him that he gets funded from conservative money. Some people have floated around the name Stephen Miller, and it kind of is like makes you look at things a little differently. Like, did they fund him to go to Minnesota to stir up problems so they could justify sending in 3,000 federal immigration agents to the state?
no, I mean, it's like in Portland, these guys came out, and then there was the DOJ. I don't know if they're actively pursuing this anymore, but they were like, we're going to investigate the Portland Police Bureau because this guy, Nick Sorter, who's also been in Minnesota, they're like, oh, well, they arrested him. But it was because of the like Antifa people or whatever. And you can see on his own stream that he's like, I'm going to walk through this crowd of them where they have their tent set up. And then he tries to paint it in another interview like he was just trying to get to his car. And I'm like, well, there's a sidewalk on the other side. Like,
and then, then you see from the White House, Caroline Leavitt celebrate these folks as the only true journalists because they parrot what they believe.
Yeah.
So that's the worry, is that we're now in this space where people are, who knows where Nick Shirley really gets his money from. If I see him ever, I'm going to ask him on camera because I'd like to know the answer to this rumor and have him directly say it or not, right? Because there's this belief that everyone is independent until they need to get paid, right? Until they make a living.
How do you approach that type of question? Because sometimes I have these questions where I'm like, where I'm like, I want to ask this person this, but I know that they're just going to deny it. Like,
for me, thank you for the question. For me, it's a journalist's responsibility to make that good faith effort. Whether or not somebody's going to answer your question, you have to cover your ass to answer the question, to ask the question, and to make sure that you're doing your due diligence. So it's less about the person, whether or not they're going to respond. Like, for instance, I don't want to get into it, but I called somebody yesterday, cold called, who was doing wrong. And I, had 15 seconds to get a question in. I didn't expect him to admit it, but I need to make the call, and that's journalism, right? And you're already doing all this stuff, We only have a few seconds with you left. We've got Scott Grubman, federal prosecutor, former federal criminal defense attorney. He's going to have a big take on what's going on ICE. But before I let you go, where can we follow you? How can we keep up with you? Is there anything that you wish I asked you that you didn't get asked, or stuff you want to talk about?
No, I mean, I think you had a bunch of great questions. I think the place to follow me, like Instagram, is definitely my biggest platform. I'm on TikTok and YouTube as well. And then what I'm really trying to do is grow my Substack. It's called Last Week in Hell. I do news recaps and ICE updates, and also reported stories on there too.
Kevin Foster, independent journalist. He a contributor to Mother Jones magazine, right? I love that. Or is it just Mother Jones now? No magazine, it's just Mother Jones.
I think they go both ways.
Okay, cool, man. Kevin, this was fun, man. I'm so grateful to get to know you more, and I hope to look you up and hang out with you when I see you in Portland. Hopefully, you'll go out there soon.
All right. Thanks a bunch, man. Take care.
Kevin Foster, go follow him. He's one of those, people that is doing it right. I mean, I was introduced to let me step back. Jared Zizzer, who's another independent journalist who I really admire a lot, he mentioned Kevin Foster is just crushing it. And they met in Portland, and I started following him. I wanted him on the show. We got to make that happen. We pivot now to a friend of mine, a friend of the show, Scott Grubman. Come on in here, man. I just want you to introduce yourself. We were talking earlier. Hey,
What's going on? Hey, how's it going, Nick? Good to see you. Good to see everyone. Thanks for having me.
You put something up on your social media earlier about whether or not it's lawful what ICE agents are doing. Tell us really quick about your background, like why you have authority to speak on this, and then just tell us your take.
Yeah, man. So right now I'm a criminal defense lawyer. I've been for well over a decade, but before that I was a federal prosecutor, and I handled some of these types of cases, both affirmative criminal enforcement cases, but also I oftentimes had to, unfortunately, I say this with no real pride right now, but part of my job back then was to defend federal agencies and federal agents in lawsuits involving allegations of legal or constitutional violations. Now, back when I was a prosecutor, you didn't have ICE grabbing elementary school kids out of their classrooms. You didn't have ICE or any other federal agents grabbing citizens out in the freezing cold without clothes. I'm not saying that the government was perfect back then. Please don't get me wrong, but this is a whole nother world.
Yeah.
So anyway,
hell, it seems like. I mean, people really are traumatized by this stuff. Is it?
I'm traumatized, Nick. I'm traumatized, and to be frank with you, I'm a white man. Okay. So I have a privilege that I recognize where I walk down the street, and despite I did trim my beard yesterday. As you know, it's usually like even crazier. So I look a little different, but I do have the white privilege where I can walk down the street and not have to worry about that for the most part. I was just talking to a friend of mine this morning who's Filipino. As you know, Filipinos often have darker skin. They have names that might sound Latino. He's a natural born citizen. He's an attorney, great guy. I said to him, I said, look, man, please hear my advice, and I'm not joking. Carry your passport on you wherever you go. And if someone asks you, don't give them a hard time. And I hate to say, I love fighting the power. Don't give them a hard time. Show them your passport. All right. And then if you feel, and this could be not legal advice, but good advice for all of your listeners. If you feel that your rights have been violated in a police encounter like this, just do what you need to do. Show your ID so you're able to go home, and then call a lawyer. Let the lawyers fight. Because as I told another friend not too long ago, they said, well, shouldn't I stand up for my rights? Listen, man, I'm all about standing up for your rights. That's what I do every single day. But in this day and age, if you have an encounter with ICE or federal law enforcement and you stand up for your rights, you're bound to wake up in the Congo. And that's not a joke or an exaggeration.
No, I know. And it's not to be dramatic. And so let's speak on this, because you have this new ICE memo that's out. AP gets their hands on it, NBC, and it shows that basically they don't care about the Fourth Amendment. Constitutional limits, protections, judge's warrant. Who needs that? Go in. You have an administrative warrant. What the fuck, man? Like, what was your initial reaction to learning about this?
You know, I'm jaded, man. To be honest with you, I didn't really have much of a reaction because, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I would have had a visceral reaction. But nowadays, it's just another day in Trump land. I've spoken out about this on social media and other places many, many times. Look, they could write whatever they want. It doesn't make it the law. It's not the law. Law is established, statutes and things of that nature established by Congress, and then law is established after that, case law by courts. The executive department, which includes the president, the DOJ, et cetera, they do not make law. They are simply there to enforce law, which obviously they're not really doing right now. So they could write whatever they want, but the law is the law, and the law says this. And it depends on the circumstances. If a cop, including ICE, wants to pull you over in your car or wants to stop you on the street, they need reasonable suspicion. Okay, that's the standard. And that's been the standard for a long time. The case law says it can't just be on a hunch. Hey, that guy looks like he's up to something. Just, it's a hunch. I'm going to go pull him over or stop him on the sidewalk. Can't do that. They have to have reasonable.
The Supreme Court just said, hey, look, it's okay. Well, you can go racial profile.
Not exactly. Although, trust me, I am very upset about the case, but not exactly. So what happened is a federal judge in California, as you know, Nick, because I think you spent a lot of time out there in Southern California, at one point issued an order preventing ICE from making stops that are motivated by race or ethnicity.
Right.
And the DOJ appealed it. It went to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court did not overturn it, but paused the application of that order. And in doing so, Justice Brett Kavanaugh wrote a separate opinion, what we call a concurring opinion. And what he said in that opinion is he said, look, while ethnicity or race cannot be the sole factor in determining whether to stop someone, it can be one of many factors. So now that's what we call, and I hope that Justice Kavanaugh is ashamed that this is going to be part of his legacy. Mm-hmm. That's what's called a Kavanaugh stop. A cop can pull you over. He cannot do so, he or she cannot do so based solely on race or ethnicity, but they can consider those factors in determining whether reasonable suspicion exists. So that's where the country we're living in right now. And here's the problem, man. The United States Supreme Court back in the late 19th century, there was this famous case, Marbury versus Madison. And the court said it is the duty of the court, the Supreme Court, to say what the law is. Since that time, it's been the Supreme Court's duty. They interpret the law, and what they say goes. There's no one above them. unless Congress steps in and passes another law or amends the Constitution, which is very unlikely. So unfortunately, that is the law now. Now, as we've seen, after Trump, the Trump era is over, and hopefully the Supreme Court looks different. Hopefully that rule is one day adjusted or changed. But right now, Kavanaugh stops are the law of the land.
Well, you mentioned, I hope he's embarrassed or ashamed, and it seems as though he just might be. He seemed to adjust it in a footnote in a decision that he wrote about after this Kavanaugh stop, concurring opinion. So it looks like he may have gone a little too far, even for his sake. This is Eric just put this up, the Supreme Court of the United States. What is this, Eric, if you could tell me? Oh, this is the footnote that he added on his recent, and then he's going
to look at Nick reading the footnotes and everything.
Here's the footnotes right here. The state and the government disagree about whether the immigration officers have violated the Constitution in making certain immigration stops and arrests. The basic constitutional rules governing that dispute are longstanding and clear. The Fourth Amendment requires that immigration stops must be based on reasonable suspicion of illegal present stops, but must be brief. Arrests must be based on the probable cause, and officers must not employ excessive force. Moreover, the officers must not make interior immigration stops or arrest based on race or ethnicity.
And that's another good point, Nick. So for arrest, it's a different standard. Arrest requires something more than reasonable suspicion. It requires probable cause. So, but anyway, listen, the bottom line is this. The guidance coming out of the DOJ and the Trump administration in terms of what federal agents, particularly ICE agents, can and cannot do are just completely contrary to the law, completely contrary to the Constitution. However, what I will say, unfortunately, is that federal agents do have a lot of protection. So, if the question that has been raised to me is like, okay, so what? They're not allowed to do this. They're not supposed to do this. Well, what if they do? Because they are. They are doing the things that they're not supposed to do. They are focusing exclusively on race and ethnicity when stopping someone. I saw a video again this morning of a woman, a Latino-looking woman going into a Home Depot to shop, and they were there saying, stop, show me your papers. I'm not aware of any other circumstance of going into a Home Depot to shop that creates reasonable suspicion. So to me, there's no other question as that was race and ethnicity. So what can be done about it? Two possible things. There is the possibility when an ICE agent crosses the line and commits a criminal act, like the ICE agent who shot and killed Renee Good. I personally believe, I've said, based on at least the video I've seen, that is not a justified killing. I believe that's murder. And I believe that officer will be indicted by a state grand jury in Minnesota at some point. Then the question is, okay, anyone can indict anyone, as we've seen, but will anything actually happen with this? We've seen Stephen Miller and J.D. Vance say, oh, well, they're entitled to immunity. Sometimes they are. A lot of times.
This idea of the supremacy clause, right? If a federal official is charged with a crime in the capacity of their job, that's protection. The supremacy clause. We heard that come up recently.
Yes, it's nuanced though. So under the supremacy clause, a state can prosecute a federal agent. First thing that the supremacy clause is going to require is if that happens, the federal agent is entitled to remove that prosecution to federal court. So let's just play this out. DA in Minneapolis prosecutes the Renee Good killer.
Yeah.
He is entitled under the supremacy clause to seek removal of that federal or that state criminal prosecution to federal court. Then he will be entitled to immunity hearing. And in that immunity hearing,
where'd he go?
It shows, there I am. In that immunity hearing, if he shows that his actions were reasonable, he will be entitled to immunity. But that's the key, Nick. If he shows his actions are reasonable, I'm not going to be the judge. I'm not going to be on the jury. Neither are you. But
right.
Ultimately, the fact finder, or here it's going to be the judge that's going to decide the immunity issue, is going to have to decide, was shooting Renee Good 3 times at point blank through the window while she was driving away reasonable? And maybe the judge will say it was. I personally don't think it was.
Well, the other part was that he lifted his phone up. He switched hands, right, to get ready for it. And then he says, fucking bitch.
Right. And that, I was just going to say that, though, I'm a criminal defense lawyer. So it's oftentimes what my clients do after they commit the alleged crime that really puts the nail in the coffin. Right. And you better believe that if I was representing just somebody off the street who was accused of killing someone, and their defense was, well, it was justified self-defense, and there was evidence that that person said those two words while walking away from the scene with a phone in his hand, that would certainly be relevant evidence. Now, in addition, though,
relevant. Then he leaks it to Alpha News, which is defending the shooting. It's a right-wing site. You know, it's like it's all calculated propaganda.
It's America 2026. You know that song, "This Is America." I always play that on my reels in the background because, yeah, I mean, you know, that's a whole nother thing. But that kind of leads me into this next thing that I've been saying a lot. In addition to criminal prosecution, which is rare, of a federal agent, there is the possibility of people who have their constitutional rights violated by a federal agent, including an ICE agent, to bring a civil lawsuit. You've probably heard it's called a Bivens lawsuit. And the Bivens word is just the name of a famous case from the early 70s that created this cause of action, that recognized this cause of action. So basically, if, let's say, this poor gentleman who was a citizen who was handcuffed and brought out in the freezing cold and embarrassed on national TV, and it winds up he didn't do anything wrong. He has a very, very, very good argument, in my opinion, based on what I see, that his Fourth Amendment rights were violated. If he could then file potentially a federal lawsuit, a suit in federal court against ICE as an agency under this cause of action called Bivens, and he would have to show two things. He would have to show that this agent was acting, or the agents that arrest him were acting within the course of their duty as ICE agents, which I think will be an easy thing to show. And then, similar to the criminal analysis, second, he would have to show that these agents' conduct was unreasonable and violated clearly established constitutional rights. God, I don't know all the facts, and I'm the first person to say, look, I'm a lawyer, can't speculate on a case until you know all the facts. Putting all that aside, based on the little I do know, it seems very likely that someone in his position would be able to make that argument. And here's the thing, Nick, those are brought to juries. Right. Okay. You have to bring a good enough case to get past the motion to dismiss. But once you do, it's a jury's decision. And so I think what you're going to see in the next few years are civil Bivens lawsuits filed against folks like that gentleman, against these federal agencies, being brought to juries in liberal cities like LA, like Minneapolis, who have been terrified by ICE and the Trump administration's tactics. And so I think whether or not these folks, Renee Goodkiller, or the other folks who are detaining children and grabbing them and dragging them through the snow, whether they're criminally prosecuted or not, which I think they should be, but whether or not they are, I think there's a decent possibility that ICE is going to be hit with huge judgments over the next few years as these lawsuits keep coming.
God, such a smart take, man. You're not just an attorney, you're a brilliant attorney. It's so wonderful to just kind of hear you explain everything. How can people keep up with you? How can they follow you? Where do we see more Scott Grubman?
Yeah, for this kind, I have a couple of like personalities. I'm like Superman, you know, I have my professional world and then what I do. But for this kind of world, I'd love for people to follow me on ATL Defender, ATL Atlanta, ATL Defender on Instagram. And I also have TikTok. I'm not like as good as you. You're amazing with all the social media. I love it. Keep up the great work. I'm just kind of starting these things, so be patient with me, but definitely follow me because I will be talking a lot about this because unfortunately, man, I hate to bring up, like, I woke up 2 days ago and I saw an article. Trump's first year is over. And I was like, holy crap. It's been 1 year. He has 3 more to go. So this is going to keep going. So keep up the good work, man.
Hey, we're in it for the long haul, man. You know, we're in
people like you, though, and the gentleman you had before, and all the other independent journalists that I now follow. I never really I never followed independent journalists. I was always like so many other people, ABC, CNN, that's how I met you, etc. And I still like all those. You know, we won't talk about CBS, but you know, independent journalism now is so important. So I'm going to continue to follow you, and I appreciate everything you do.
Man, thanks for rocking with me, man. I rock with you the same. Scott Grubman, ATL Defender. Right, appreciate you, dog. Thank you. See you next time.
Thank you. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
That was Scott Grubman, friend of the show. We'll see him back. Smart take, man. And Eric had pulled some clips for us to end the show on to just sort of talk about what we've been seeing and experiencing out there. This general strike that's planned as well, which seems to be gaining traction. It seems that a union gave a press conference recently. Not it seems, we have a union that gave a press conference, and they were talking about a general strike, and that's catching on in other states. Let's see what they plan on doing on January 23rd. It's supposed to start tomorrow.
About our endorsement of the January 23rd action, the day of truth and freedom. No work, no school, no shopping throughout our communities. It is a tragic amount of circumstances that has brought us here and to this mission today. Working people across our community are afraid for their lives. We are working with many families who have already been detained. Most of these families have been detained while they were on their way to work or on their way home from work. This is leading to our families, union and non-union, workers in our community having to make gut-wrenching, life-altering choices about whether or not they're going to go to work so they can put food on the table, whether they're going to stay home and stay safe and stay alive.
We talk about it here a lot, about how Latinos are the backbone. You know, we're not just the workers or those blue collar folks. We're the ones that are owning the restaurants, man. You know, business owner in Santa Ana, where I'm from in Southern California.
Los latinos a todos nuestra raza. Apoyemos a tener cerrado el día 23 de enero. Si tenemos negocio, cerrarlo. Los que estamos en casa, diría que para apoyarnos entre todos, porque si no los apoyamos, entonces, ¿qué va a pasar?
I know that I'm never going to reach people who see a 5-year-old boy used as bait to lure out his loved ones by ICE agents, people who support that. I know I'm never going to reach them. I know that people are pretty dug in their positions, but I also know that there's a lot of people out there who are disillusioned with the media, disillusioned with their politicians, feel like Congress is not working right now, they're traumatized. They don't know what to do. And I sometimes don't know what to do. I think this is what I can do and where I can help people and meet the moment. But I understand those people who feel overwhelmed by this and who think that there's never going to be accountability. That gave me a little bit of hope there to hear from somebody who's aware of the law, that potentially there is a remedy going forward and that we'll see some lawsuits in the future. Will that be enough? Will that be enough to reunite families who have been ripped apart? Will that repair the trauma of little kids seeing their fathers or mothers ripped away from them? No, that's not going to go away or make it better. Some of the first memories for some children that we see out there in this country will be seeing their fathers or their loved ones ripped away. Getting a phone call here. The truth is, though, I feel like we are making a difference. I feel like if there's anyone in a position to speak on this, it's me. People are always willing to say, where was your energy when Obama was in office? We had a guest on who talked about how President Obama deported about 400,000 people per year. And if you Google my name and President Obama and UACs, you will see where my energy was. I was the reporter that broke the story about what the then Obama administration was doing to unaccompanied minors. Can't really talk shit, man. I've had the same energy. I talked to a class at UGA today, and I use this line, which you've probably heard here, that we struggle from a disease of individualism. And there was a student in that class that said, what's wrong with being an individual and only caring about yourself? I said, okay, you know, sound like a great capitalist there, right? It all starts in the home. And for me, I was raised to use my privilege to speak out against powerful people who were picking on others. I was raised to use my privilege to speak up for people who did not have a voice or felt that they didn't have a say in things. And that's what I'm doing now. I'm not doing anything different than all of these journalism giants that have come before me. Edward R. Murrow, he stepped up to advertising. Walter Cronkite, he made it known that he didn't agree with the Vietnam War. Anderson Cooper, you know, Hurricane Katrina. I'm not doing anything different than taking a stand for something that I'm personally impacted by and personally affected by. I could be, you know, Could be worse, right? I'm not undocumented. I'm in this country. I've been here for a long time. But when I have these conversations with people and look them in their eyes, I know that this is not moral, and that there have been plenty of laws in this country that were not moral, and legality does not equal morality, which is why I'm speaking out and taking a stand, because I don't agree with Trump's mass deportation policy. We should be talking about amnesty. We should be giving people a pathway to citizenship who have added value in this country. And you want to know how I know that this system is intentionally broken? Because people come here and can get a tax ID and pay taxes and work for an employer. They come here because they have the opportunity to work, and there's a system set up for them to do it. That's why I know the system is broken. Why are these individuals even able to access that? Why can they get tax IDs? Why are they able to work for companies that never end up suffering the same kinds of punishment, or the severity is not as ever matches what the undocumented immigrant faces? You want to talk about law and order? Why don't you go after the companies that employ undocumented labor? Because it's not about that, man. It's about people getting rich off of this. The meter runs the moment someone's taken into custody. You hire people because you don't really want to pay an American a fair wage. So you take advantage of a Latino or an immigrant. Someone's here who's looking for a better opportunity, because what are they going to say other than gracias, dame más, por favor, mande? Part of our culture is just being raised to be grateful to be anywhere we are, being grateful to have an opportunity, the humility that comes with it. Sometimes I don't think that we're good at fighting enough for our own cause. We're just so happy to be somewhere. I don't think people who are undocumented, who are not immigrants, have ever been told that they couldn't in this country. You know? And so we're going to speak up and speak out, and we're going to continue to fight for people who can't fight for themselves because others say it's law and order, when we know that's just a bunch of bullshit. What about the Constitution? These ICE agents, they're treading on everybody that gets in their way. Feel free to join us, man. You can join the bandwagon. There's room. Thanks, guys, for a great show. Really appreciate your time. Thank you for liking, sharing, subscribing, supporting. Thanks for our guests, Kevin Foster, independent journalist, great guy, man. Scott Grubman, great take on the law. And to our first guest, Congresswoman Nanette Barragán, who has had her hands full since the first week of June. I mean, she's a lawmaker. She always has her hands full, but now is an especially difficult time. Thank you guys for helping us make truth go viral. And as always, go try to have a great day on purpose. See you later.